Hi, my name is Brendan Mann. I'm going to give you an overview of my Nixie Tube Clock Stereo. So Nixie tubes are these right here. They stand for Numerical Indicator Experiment, and they were primarily used in lab equipment back in the 60s and 50s up through to the 70s. Now these are gas-filled tubes with little numbers inside. If you look inside there, you'll actually see little shaped wires shaped like each one of the digits. And the way they work is applying a high voltage to the gas causes the individual digits to glow. Now, my idea was to make a Nixie Tube Clock Stereo, and that's what you're seeing here. These switches control the stereo, so you have your volume for the stereo, on switch for the stereo, on switch for the clock, and then bass and treble. So really, in designing this clock, there were 4 different elements I needed to consider. First, obviously, would be the Nixie tubes and the related electronics, the electronics necessary to drive those tubes. And what I actually did for those was I got a kit that comes with a PC board that's really compact, and really it's going to be a lot cheaper than if you individually bought all of those components necessary to create the high voltage and drive these clocks yourself. The kit I got was through PV Electronics, and I'd really recommend it. My kit in particular is a Nixie QTC, and I chose it for both the features that it came with. A lot of the nice effects you see here is in the fading of the digits and that scroll back effect with the counting down from 9 to 0. And the cost. Like I said, going with the kit, not only is it going to be a lot more compact, it's also going to be a lot cheaper than if you bought all of the components you needed yourself. Now, the actual tubes, they don't come with the kit. You can buy it with the kit, but you can purchase them separately as well. I went with IN14 tubes, and they're coming to me from Russia. Now, I said that these tubes were used a long time ago, and primarily for lab equipment. A lot of that lab equipment was still very useful far beyond the time when Nixie tubes themselves became outdated. So they still had to keep a supply of these tubes on hand to replace them when they burnt out on the equipment. So Russia actually still has warehouses full of these, and that's where most of your tubes are going to come from if you purchase them online. Now, the second component I have really are going to be the speakers and the amplifiers. Like I said, it's 2 separate devices essentially, the tubes for the clock and the stereo system. The speakers themselves, I took the woofer and the tweeter out of an old speaker system that I had. I broke the speaker housing apart and took the loudspeakers out of them, and they were actually in great shape. The speakers that I had, they were defective, it wasn't working, something had come apart internally, but once I took the speaker housing apart, the loudspeakers themselves were in great shape. And the power amplifier I chose, the power amplifier is actually housed in this center housing right here. I really just chose that for price and compactness. I just selected one from eBay that had a nice look to it as far as the dials that fit in with the rest of the clock. Now, really, the next question is, how do I actually play music on the stereo? How do I get that in there? Originally, I was thinking maybe just making it an AM/FM radio, but ultimately I decided that would be, not really as useful for me. For the most part, I'm going to be wanting to play music off of my phone. So what I decided to do was get a nice Bluetooth adapter so I can connect external devices to this clock stereo and play off of them, particularly my phone. And I think that'll give it a lot more flexibility. We'll future-proof it in a way so that if I decide I'm no longer using Spotify, I'm not locked into that on this clock. I'll just download whatever new service I'm using and connect over Bluetooth. So the third component that I had was basically power input for the 2 different devices. So the clocks are actually driven by a 12-volt power supply. So I needed to connect a power supply into the back there for that. And I also needed to power the power amplifier. So when I selected the power amplifier, I tried to make sure I had one that was 12 volts. I did have to step it down from 12 volts to 5 volts for the Bluetooth adapter, but that's the only location. Power runs through the right switch for the clock, and the left switch for the stereo for the power amplifier and the Bluetooth adapter. So the next component would be the actual design and construction, and you need to make sure that you think it through pretty well, so you don't end up with a design that's just really not feasible. So I wanted a functional design that was consistent with the overall aesthetic of the Nixie tubes. So really it was brass, copper, and wood. So I've got these brass rods here that serve as the load-bearing section connecting the two speaker housings. It also protects the tubes. The tubes themselves, they're glass. They're relatively fragile, so having those brass rods over the top will help protect them. And on the side here, on either side of the speaker housing, I've got copper sheeting. And that was really useful. I like the look of it, and really it was a good, easy way to have a nice curved elliptic section, because I could just curve the metal down and didn't have to carve anything out in a consistent elliptic curve. So it was a relatively simple design, and I wanted components that all the components would pretty much serve a purpose and also look nice without excessive ornamentation. And I really think it turned out pretty well, and it also had to be manageable with simple hand tools. I'm living in an apartment. I didn't use any CNC machines or anything like that. Really, my tools were limited to a jigsaw, a sander, a drill, and some tin snips for the copper sheeting. So that's pretty much it in terms of the design. And as you can see here, the clock works with the power, and the stereo. Let's give it a minute so that the Bluetooth adapter can turn on, and I can connect to it. So right now I'm connecting with my phone, and here we go. So right now I'm playing that off of my phone, and it's connecting through to my Nixie Tube Clock Stereo. Hope you like it, and I hope it helps you out with your designs.